The winter of 1879 didn't arrive like weather. It came like a drawn blade across the mountains, silent and slow. In a hidden valley, one cabin glowed with impossible warmth, while every other hearth strained against the killing frost.
No smoke, no woodpile. How can it stand against this cold? Reeves, open this door. I am freezing to death out here.
Inside, the air was still and warm. James Reeves rose from his chair, no frost on his beard, no shudder in his hands.
What do you want, Kenneth? The last time you stood at my door, you called my house a pillow.
I don't care what I said. The whole village is burning chairs to stay alive, and you've got nothing but candlelight in there. How?
You wouldn't believe me. You laughed when I told you the secret was in the walls.
Then show me. I am begging you. I can't feel my hands.
But a year earlier, the whole valley had laughed at the thought that a man could live inside a pillow. 1 year earlier, James Reeves stood at the edge of his goose pond, watching the birds break thin ice with their warm, dry breasts.
They swim in freezing water, but their feathers never soak. It's the loft, the trapped air. That's what keeps them warm.
That evening, he found Mary in the cabin doorway, her arms full of kindling, her expression curious as he spoke of a wild idea.
I've been watching the geese. Their feathers trap still air. If I build our walls with a hollow space and pack it with down, the house will hold heat like a bird.
You want to stuff the walls with feathers? People will think we've gone mad, James.
Let them. Still air is the warmest thing in creation. I am going to build a house that laughs at winter.
Then I'll start plucking every goose and saving every feather. We'll need more than a wish to fill a wall.
They began that same week, filling burlap sacks with goose down until the cabin floor looked like a burst pillow. Sack after sack, the loft accumulated. By the time the first hard frost bit the morning grass, the sacks stood stacked taller than a man, and the cabin still had unfinished walls.
This winter, Mary, we live inside a pillow, and we'll be the warmest fools this valley ever saw.
Through the last mild weeks of autumn, James framed a double wall in the cabin's main room, leaving a hollow core between inner and outer planks. Mary stood ready with the first sack. As James pulled a handful free, white loft spilled into the dark timber cavity like captured summer.
Keep it packed. No empty pockets, no sagging. The air must stay still.
I am pressing it tight as a goose's breast. If this doesn't hold heat, nothing will.
By the first snowfall, the east wall stood sealed, thick as a winter quilt, yet oddly light against the heavy timber. A carpenter hauling shingles stopped at the open door. He stared at the feathered void and let out a long, barking laugh, his apprentice joining in behind him.
Something funny about keeping a house warm, friend?
The carpenter shook his head and walked on, but the laugh had already found a path into the village. That night, James and Mary worked by lantern light, sealing the last plank over the west wall's feather core, the silence inside as thick as the loft.
Let them laugh. A goose doesn't worry about a fox's opinion of its feathers.
Within days, the tale of the pillow house filled the general store. Men laughed into their coffee. Women shook their heads at the waist.
Down in the walls. The fool has buried coins in his timber. Reeves, I hear you've been hiding my merchandise in your walls. You've stuffed good down where it'll rot and be chewed by mice.
The down isn't yours, Kenneth. It belongs to the geese, and now it belongs to our house.
He'll never understand. Let him talk.
I'll give you half the market price for the rest of your sacks. That's more than they're worth to a man who stuffs walls with gold.
Not at any price. This down is worth more in my walls than you'd ever pay in a dozen winters.
You hear that, men? He thinks feathers in a wall are worth more than feather beds.
A few onlookers laughed along, but others only watched in silence. The mockery had found its public stage, but not everyone was its willing audience.
If the winter is kind, you can laugh again. If it isn't, you'll remember this moment.
The cold took a sudden bite in late autumn. One morning, James found the outer logs coated in frost thick as salt.
Now we see if the Goose loft is more than a peculiar hope.
He lit a fire, barely larger than a breakfast hearth. Within an hour, the cabin felt like spring.
James, the windows are frosted shut outside, but this inner wall is warm as a wool blanket. It's holding.
He went into town that afternoon, his breath free of a chill. At the store, men crowded near the stove.
We barely fed the fire. The house stayed warm. I haven't split my winter wood yet.
The storekeeper chuckled and said autumn warmth always fools a man before the real freeze settles in. Kenneth leaned toward the stove, letting his voice carry over the mugs.
Give it a month. Those walls will draw every mouse in the valley. You'll wake up in chewed fluff and droppings.
The rumor of rot and vermin spread faster than the frost, but inside the feather walls, the air never moved. In his counting house, Kenneth scratched figures in a ledger. The remaining down was worth more if he could force a desperate sale. He rode to the cabin with a warmer offer, enough to tempt a hungry man, but only a fraction of the insulation's worth.
I've been too harsh, Reeves. I'll pay full market price for the rest of the down. No more jokes about pillows.
You never offered full price for a goose feather in your life. What do you really want, Kenneth?
I want you to have grain for the winter instead of feathers. I want you to be warm.
My walls keep us warm. My geese will keep us in down. I'll not trade my future for your coin.
Mary stood near the nearly empty larder, the last salt clinging to the bottom of a barrel. Her silence was louder than Kenneth's offer.
If another frost kills the geese, we'll have nothing, but I trust his vision.
You'll remember this offer. When you are burning feather walls for heat, the town will hear of your folly.
James watched him go, then turned back to the wall that would save them. No hunger would make him rip it open. After the clash with Kenneth, Mary spent her days with the geese, her hands gentle among the birds, but her mind working like a ledger. She had kept a quiet secret through the autumn, selecting the strongest layers for breeding, setting aside the finest down for next year.
James, our flock is larger now. We'll have enough down to refill these walls every year, and then some. If it works, we could give a sack to someone who needs it. Insulate a neighbor's house.
You've been planning for more than our own survival.
I want this to matter beyond us. If they won't listen now, perhaps one day they will.
Keep that hope close, but guard it. Let the world prove itself ready before we offer more.
He looked at the feather wall, then at Mary, understanding the depth of her quiet faith. In that moment, the pillow house became more than a shelter. It was a seed for a different winter.
When the ice breaks, we'll see who remembers. But for now, our walls are enough.
For a week in early winter, the sun softened the drifts, and the village forgot the cold. Pools of meltwater stood in the lanes. Men joked that the pillow house had been built for a winter that might never come. The mockery grew louder with the sun.
What good is a feather wall when the ground thaws? It'll soak up the damp and rot before the next frost.
James ignored them and spent the thaw sealing every hairline seam with extra down, his hands never idle.
I felt a draft near the door frame. If even one cold finger gets through, the whole wall might as well be open.
I'll paste over the cracks from the outside. Don't stop until it's perfect.
The village saw James still climbing around his cabin with burlap sacks and called it madness under a quiet sky.
The sun is a liar. The north wind hasn't forgotten us.
By the time the thaw ended, the cabin walls were packed to the rafters, a fortress of still air.
Not a draft left. If winter wants in, it'll have to bury us first.
The thaw shattered in a single afternoon. The sky lowered like a lid of iron, and the wind stopped as if the valley were holding its breath. In the village, old men sniffed the air and remembered a winter that had left coffins frozen in the ground.
Mary, get inside. This isn't ordinary weather.
They barred the door and banked the windows. James scraped a spark onto a handful of kindling. In the town square, men fought over the last cord of firewood, their shouts thin against the gathering dark. Then the wind returned, not as a breeze but as a hammer. Snow buried the slopes in minutes.
One small fire, James. Will it hold through the night?
The walls will hold. We've trapped the air. Now we wait.
Outside, the storm clawed at the logs, but inside the feather walls, the air never stirred. The pillow house was no joke now. It was the only pocket of silence in a world of screaming white. For 36 endless hours, the blizzard laid siege to the cabin. The timbers groaned, but the feather walls held firm.
Walls still warm. No frost on the inner planks.
We've burned barely half a log. In any other house, we'd be splitting the furniture by now.
Out there, they're huddled over roaring fires, and still freezing. The wind is stealing every degree from their walls.
Through a frost-laced window, the world was a white blur, but the cabin's inner skin remained bone-dry and warm.
The geese were wiser than all of us. This is how they sleep on ice water.
We borrowed from them, and now their gift is keeping us alive.
Outside, the storm shrieked without mercy, yet not a single draft slipped through the seams. The cabin was a living proof. James and Mary sat in the silence, knowing what the rest of the valley could not yet believe. They had stolen a secret from the geese.
The worst is still coming, but the walls will stay, and so will we.
Inside Kenneth's house, the sawdust walls drank the cold like a tomb. Frost grew on the ceiling beams, and the fire ate a chair every hour.
Throw another log. No, break the table. This house is a sieve.
He shoved his fur coat into a gap in the plaster, but the wind screamed through as if it were paper.
I told Reeves his walls would rot. Now my own are failing.
On the third day, the firewood was gone, and the furniture was ash. Ice began forming on his beard indoors. His wife's voice, thin with cold, cut through the dark. Did you laugh at the only man who knew how to stay warm?
Quiet woman. He wouldn't sell me the feathers. He buried them in walls like a fool who now sits warm while I freeze. What if the joke was on me all along?
The memory of their negotiation burned hotter than any fire. James's steady refusal, the crowded store, the laughter he'd led.
If I don't swallow my pride and go to that pillow house, I won't last another night.
Kenneth wrapped himself in every rag he owned and pushed out into the storm. The wind blinded him in 3 steps. The snow was waist deep. He fell twice, his hands already numb. The cabin's light was a distant orange star, half frozen. He staggered into the clearing and stopped. The cabin's chimney gave only a wisp of smoke, but the walls radiated a low warmth he could feel even outside.
No roar of wind inside. The stillness in there is absolute. He built a fortress out of feathers.
Kenneth stumbled to the door and raised a frozen fist. The wood felt warm through his glove.
Reeves, open up. I need to speak with you.
The wind swallowed his voice. He pounded again, the blows muffled by snow packed against the frame.
If he doesn't hear, if he chooses not to hear, I am a dead man in the snow.
Inside, a shadow moved. A line of golden light appeared at the edge of the door.
Please, God, let him not turn me away.
James pulled the door wide. Heat spilled into the snow, but his gaze was colder than the storm.
You called my house a pillow. You said it would rot. Now you come begging to the fool?
I was wrong. I mocked what I didn't understand. Please, Reeves, I am freezing.
Behind James, Mary appeared, her face a mask of stillness, neither welcoming nor vengeful.
Why should I open my door to a man who tried to starve us into selling our walls?
Because I have nothing left but the truth. You were right. I was blind.
The wind screamed. Kenneth stumbled forward, his knees buckling. The last of his pride broke.
Get inside.
James stepped aside. Kenneth staggered into the warmth, his frost-caked beard melting as he stared at the feather-stuffed walls. The warmth gave him life, but the silence in the room was the coldness of a debt not yet paid. The warmth finally stopped Kenneth's shivering, but his gaze remained locked on the feather walls, as if they held a cipher.
How? The fire's barely alive. How does this room feel like June?
James lifted a lantern and walked to the wall. He held the flame close to a hairline seam between two planks.
Watch the flame. Not the wall. The flame.
The flame stood tall and still as a statue. No flicker, no dance, just a tongue of fire frozen in time.
Moving air carries heat away. The down traps the air so it can't move. That's all it does.
Kenneth stared at the motionless fire, and the arithmetic of a lifetime rearranged itself behind his eyes.
He didn't just insulate a house. He copied the Goose.
Mary watched from the hearth, her silence a patient wisdom. She had understood this long before the storm.
You wanted to buy feathers. I wanted to buy warmth. Only one of us bought anything of value.
What would it cost me to learn how to build walls like these?
You think I'd sell you the knowledge?
I'll pay whatever you ask. I have coin.
Put that away. I don't want your money.
He let the silence stretch. When he spoke again, it was with the weight of a long-held resolve.
If you want to build a feather wall, pay with the truth. Tell the valley what you saw here and that you were wrong.
Kenneth's throat moved. The price was heavier than any sack of coins. Mary, still by the fire, did not speak, but her stillness held the same question.
On the day the storm breaks, I'll stand in the store and tell them, you have my word.
Words are cheap, Kenneth, but I'll watch you honor this one.
The blizzard weakened just enough for them to move loads. James and Mary carried lumber and burlap through the thinning snow toward Kenneth's frozen house. Kenneth led them into his front room. The sawdust walls were stripped bare, the air still raw with frost.
Frame a hollow wall. Every gap a thief of warmth. The down must fill it without a single empty pocket.
Kenneth's numb hands fumbled the planks, but he hammered and measured with a furious, shame-driven precision. When the frame stood, Mary opened a sack. White loft spilled into the dark cavity, like fresh snow, feather upon feather.
I called this waste. Now, my life depends on it.
Once you fill a wall with a gift from nature, you can't unsee its worth.
They sealed the inner planks. Within minutes, the tiny room held heat like a closed fist. The rest of the house still froze, walls weeping cold. But behind that single feather door, the air was still and warm.
Now you know. Remember your word.
The storm broke on the fourth day. Sunlight fell on a valley littered with broken timber and frozen sorrow. People stumbled into the lanes, counting the dead. Livestock frozen in their pens. Chimneys choked with ice. In the midst of it, Kenneth stood on a mounting block and raised his voice, face hard with a new resolve.
I have something to show you. Something that kept the Reeves alive while we burned our chairs.
He led them through the frozen hallway to his front room. The feather wall stood sealed, radiating a quiet, impossible warmth. A candle flame held near a seam did not flicker. The air was trapped, still as stone.
I mocked James Reeves for this wall. I was wrong. He copied the Goose and it saved his family.
Townsfolk pressed calloused hands to the planks, feeling the dry warmth. Murmurs of wonder replaced the old jeers. By sundown, the story had traveled to every chimney. The pillow house was no longer a joke. It was a hope. James, standing in his own warm cabin, heard the first knock of respect on his door. The knock at James's door was not for shelter, but for explanation. The village wanted to hear the full account. James stepped onto the store's low porch, a cloth-bound ledger in his hand. Kenneth stood in the crowd, face unreadable.
I kept every number. Last winter, we burned 2 cords of wood. Any of you burn less than 12? A cord costs $2. I saved 10. That's $20. Kenneth offered me half that for the whole season's down.
Kenneth's throat tightened. The arithmetic fell on him like a physical weight.
The down wasn't merchandise. It was firewood I never had to cut. It was frost that never touched my wife. Its value was never in the sack. It was in the wall, keeping still air where the cold couldn't reach.
A long murmur ran through the crowd. Men looked at their boots, women at the frozen ground. Kenneth said nothing, The man who had called him a fool now stood silently, his face a ruin of old pride. James closed the ledger. The pillow house had won, not with anger, but with arithmetic. Before the crowd could find words, Mary stepped out from beside James, a full burlap sack in her arms.
Our geese give more than we can use. Each year, I save the best down for another wall. This sack is already full. It's for someone who lost theirs to the cold.
A murmur rose. No one had expected a gift, not after the ridicule they had heaped on the pillow house.
We'll show you how, but the down comes free as it came to us from the geese.
A woman clutching a child to her hip took a step forward, her eyes fixed on the sack. The child smiled, and for that instant, winter seemed to lose its last edge. In the back, Kenneth stood frozen, his face a shadow of its old arrogance. The mockery was gone. The pillow house had become a promise, a cycle of goose down and shared warmth.
You've carried the future in that sack, Mary.
Before the sun climbed higher, the crowd followed James and Mary to a drafty cabin on the edge of the village.
Frame a hollow wall. Pack it tight. Leave no seam. I'll show you the rest.
The woman who had stepped forward began hammering planks with trembling hands, her child watching from the corner.
Open the sack. Let the loft fill every hollow. This is what freedom from the cold feels like.
From the back of the crowd, Kenneth stepped forward and placed a single nail in James's open palm. James closed his fingers around it, gave a single nod, and drove the nail into the inner plank. The wall grew board by board, feather by feather, while half the village watched in silence. Learning, the child in the corner stopped shivering. A dry warmth rose from the planks like a promise kept.
A wall that was once a joke is now a lesson. Remember that.
When the last plank was sealed, the room held the heat of a small candle. But in the heart of the valley, it kindled something far larger. Snowmelt ran in silver threads down the mountain. The valley shook off its white coat, and new timber stood against the blue sky. Several homes now wore feather-insulated rooms. Their windows steamed with life rather than frost. James and Mary stood near the goose pond, the flock honking softly as they preened new down for another season.
Another year, another gift from our birds.
They saved us. Now they're saving the whole valley.
A farmer passing with a hat in hand stopped to thank them, his voice cracking with emotion. In the distance, a figure moved with a hammer and a stack of planks. The feather buyer was now a wall builder. Kenneth no longer haggled over sacks. He had learned that warmth was its own currency. The warm breeze lifted a single feather from the pond's edge, carrying it over the homes and up to the ridgeline. The pillow house had not just survived the deadliest winter, it had taught a valley to live inside a goose's secret. The feather rose on a rising thermal, lifting past the new timber and the green buds, higher than any chimney smoke. Below, a valley once frozen and scornful had stitched its wounds with down. The feather drifted past a window where a child now slept without shivering. It crossed the ridgeline, where the deadliest winter had first been felt, now soft with sunlight. In the end, it was not coin that saved them. It was a handful of loft, borrowed from the breast of a goose, and that secret, stolen from ice water, had proven warmer than any merchant's promise. When the next winter whispers across the peaks, the valley will remember, and somewhere above, a goose dives into cold water, her down still dry, her secret already in the walls. The warmest walls are sometimes filled with something money could never buy.